In western Germany, in the seemingly peaceful town of Huxter in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia, stood an inconspicuous house with curtains permanently drawn. It could have blended in with hundreds of others if not for what was happening behind its walls, something so monstrous that the press and investigators soon gave it the grim name House of Horrors. Its residents, Wilfried and Angelica Wageners, an outwardly unremarkable couple, for several years led a double life, turning their own home into a torture chamber for lonely and vulnerable women. On April 27, 2016, police in Germany carried out an operation to arrest Wilfried and Angelica Wageners. The couple was accused of the murder of a woman. During the investigation, it emerged that the spouses had held their victim in horrifying conditions for months. However, this charge was only the beginning of the horror that had been unfolding in the house. It turned out that the couple had used a personal ad in the Lonely Hearts column to lure women into their home. The women, often the most vulnerable and defenseless, who dreamed of finding love, became victims of a nightmarish cycle of abuse, torture, and murder carried out by the Wageners. All these horrific acts were part of the couple's perverted games. The case caused widespread public outrage, and the house where it all happened became infamously known as the House of Horrors. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more cases. This helps us a lot. Thank you. Some names of the people involved in the story have been changed for ethical reasons. Wilfried was born in 1970 in Bochum, Germany. He and his sister grew up in a family where the father, an alcoholic and tyrant, ruled everything. The boy's childhood was filled with constant beatings and endless fear. In search of salvation, Wilfried's mother eventually found a new partner, a farmer, and in the early 1990s, after many years of abuse, she moved the children to the countryside far away from her ex-husband. At first, the farm became a refuge and source of stability for Wilfried. He threw himself into the work, which distracted him from his painful past. However, the apparent calm did not last long. Every Sunday, when Wilfried's mother went to work, her new partner took advantage of the moment and abused the boy and his sister. They silently endured the suffering because their well-being depended entirely on this man. As he grew older, Wilfried took any job, but they were all temporary. He could never find stable employment. The young man tried to train as a mechanic, but all his attempts ended in failure, and he returned to the farm again. Wilfried's first known relationship with a woman named Michaela began in 1991. They dated for a long time but never became a couple. 3 years later, in 1994, Wilfried met Anna, who had placed a personal ad in the local newspaper seeking a life partner. They quickly found common ground and moved in together in the city of Paderborn. Happiness did not last long. As soon as the young people moved out on their own, Wilfried's behavior changed sharply. He became aggressive and began beating Anna for the slightest offense. The woman hoped that marriage would bring stability and change to their lives, but it only got worse. After the wedding, Wilfried often beat his wife with his fists. To inflict additional injuries, he burned her skin with an iron and a hairdryer, and sometimes used a lighter. As a constant reminder of the cruelty, Anna was left with scars all over her body. However, even this was not enough for Wilfried. At some point, he invited his ex-girlfriend Michaela to live with them, and she joined in the abuse. Together, they beat Anna with various objects, from a club to a rubber hose, and poured alcohol on open wounds to make the pain unbearable. The violence was not only physical, Anna was mercilessly humiliated and insulted. This went on for weeks. At the same time, Wilfried warned his wife that any attempt to escape would end in her death. Fortunately, in September 1994, Anna's family, worried by her long silence, somehow managed to rescue the woman from the house. Wilfried was later arrested and received a prison sentence of 2 years and 9 months. Michaela, for her part in the torture, received only 1 year probation because by then she had given birth to Wilfried's child. The father of the baby showed no care for either the child or its mother. After his release from prison, Wilfried got a job as a security guard at a railway station. In 1999, he came across another personal ad in the Lonely Hearts column from a woman named Angelica and immediately responded to it. Angelica was born on January 21, 1970. She grew up on a modest farm where she had done agricultural work from a young age. She had no close friends or any particular hobbies. However, the girl was happy. Her life on the farm was simple and understandable. Every pfennig she earned through her labor, Angelica carefully saved for the future. By the time she came of age, she had accumulated about 160,000 German marks. Despite the fact that Angelica's intelligence level was quite high, around 120 points, she did not strive for academic or professional heights. Her romantic life was also monotonous. A short romance with a man quickly ended as soon as it became clear that he was only interested in her money. After that incident, Angelica became very cautious with her suitors. In 1999, a tragedy occurred. Her father died. Angelica had always been her daddy's favorite girl, so the loss of her father shook her to the core. The girl threw herself into work on the farm, finding comfort in routine and familiar duties. Angelica and her mother tried with all their might to manage the farm, but they could not cope. The farm needed a firm male hand. Angelica's mother decided to find help and placed a personal ad in the Lonely Hearts column in her daughter's name, claiming she was looking for a partner who could also help with the farm work. It was in response to this ad that Wilfried entered Angelica's life. Wilfried's arrival marked the beginning of a new, albeit unsettling chapter for the girl. She described it as love at first sight. The young people walked the streets holding hands, kissed, and openly showed their affection. Angelica was enchanted by her new admirer and could not believe her own happiness. Just 3 months later, on March 17, 1999, they got married. A few months after that, a child appeared in the young couple's life. At first glance, the Wageners seemed happy with their family, but unfortunately, for unknown reasons, the child was taken from them. In 2003, the couple moved to Schlangen in the state of North Rhine-Westphalia. This was done to isolate Angelica from her family. Wilfried's control over his wife was absolute. He forbade her to communicate with her mother, demanded that she cook for him every day at exactly the appointed time, and if she did not meet the requirements, he lectured her for hours on the subject of family relations. If verbal punishments did not work, beatings began. If his wife disturbed him during sleep, he chained her in another part of the house and treated her like an animal. At first, 2 of Angelica's pets, a dog and a cat, lived with her, but Wilfried ordered his wife to get rid of them. On his orders, the woman shot the dog and put the cat in the dryer, where it died in terrible agony. Angelica was so afraid of her husband that she did not dare disobey and unquestioningly took the lives of those she loved so much. Wilfried, deriving perverted pleasure from it, came up with newer and newer games, constantly tightening the conditions. One such torture game involved the man wrapping his wife in a blanket and depriving her of oxygen until she lost consciousness several times. In a more extreme version, Wilfried put a bag over his wife's head and bit her breast until it bled, which was his favorite method of play. Daily tortures also included burning with a blowtorch, dousing with boiling water, stabbing with a knife, and knocking out teeth. Later in court, Angelica testified that she considered these tortures a perverted manifestation of love, because her husband could easily have taken her life, yet she was still alive. Wilfried's merciless cruelty eventually stopped at the point where he told Angelica that he no longer found her attractive. He did not want a divorce, but for the satisfaction of his desires, he needed something new, and Angelica agreed to help her husband find another woman. She began placing ads in newspapers with content such as "Farmer seeks love," "Nice guy with a car seeks a future with a pleasant woman." When candidates responded to the good guy's hand and heart, Angelica handled the correspondence because Wilfried wrote poorly. He sometimes sent voice messages and talked on the phone. Nevertheless, these were already jointly organized efforts to lure unsuspecting women into a trap. And these actions by the Wageners marked the beginning of a long series of tortures and deaths of innocent victims they had deceived. In 2008, 38-year-old Kathy responded to the dating ad. After several phone conversations with the potential groom, the woman was crazy about him. Without hesitation, she packed her things and moved in with Wilfried. Angelica introduced herself as his sister, and soon the couple took complete control of Kathy's life. The spouses forced the woman to ask her grandparents for money. In this way, they managed to extract a significant sum from the pensioners, several thousand euros. Then the physical violence began. One day, Kathy started cooking lunch while Wilfried went to the store for groceries. When he returned home, the woman opened the door for him and immediately ran back to the kitchen without taking the shopping bags. This triggered a fit of rage in Wilfried. He began beating Kathy with everything that came to hand and then managed to convince her that it was her fault. She had provoked him with her behavior. The craziest thing was that the woman believed him. She wanted so badly to find a man that she was ready to tolerate any of his outbursts. Eventually, Wilfried and Angelica convinced Kathy that she had epilepsy and forced her to take unknown medications. The captive spent several weeks locked up, mentally broken, and completely convinced that there was simply no way out of the situation. She was given a list of strict rules: not to interrupt, not to argue, always to be ready and attentive to the man's wishes, essentially to behave like a slave. Any violation of these rules led to brutal beatings. Soon, life seemed hopeless to Kathy. It is unknown how it would have ended, but one night Wilfried threatened the woman with murder, and something inside her snapped. Kathy went to the bathroom, climbed out the window onto the street, and ran as far as she could from the House of Horrors. This escape marked the end of her 9-month hell. Although Kathy managed to escape, she did not report the violence to the police, deciding that no one would believe her. She simply wanted to live on and thanked God that she had managed to break free from captivity. Unfortunately, her silence allowed the couple to continue abusing others. From the experience with Kathy, Angelica learned a lesson. When another woman was around, Wilfried attacked her instead of his legal wife, and she liked that very much. The next woman who responded to the Wageners ad was named Annetta. She had been talking to Wilfried on the phone for about 4 weeks but had never met him in person. One late evening, when Annette was not expecting guests at all, her doorbell rang. She was shocked to see Wilfried on her porch. The man pulled out 4 rings and said they were from his ex-girlfriends. Then came the proposal. Annetta's instincts screamed danger. She felt a chill run down her spine and realized something was wrong, but she forced herself to stay calm. The woman chose one of the rings but did not let Wilfried into the house, suggesting they continue the conversation the next day. When the door closed, Annetta's heart could not return to a normal rhythm for a long time. She understood that she needed to act quickly. The next day, the woman cut off all contact with Wilfried, stating that she did not want to see or hear from him. She hoped that would be the end of it, but her ordeal was only beginning. Angelica and Wilfried began stalking her. They watched her every step and constantly pestered her with phone calls. The pressure grew. The woman could not escape the hidden threat from the potential groom. The stalking was aimed at breaking her will and forcing her to submit. But despite the growing fears and stress, Annetta remained strong. Her refusal to give in became a thrilling game for her life. Every knock at the door, every phone call reminded her of the danger and made her heart beat faster. The days dragged on like eternity, but in the end, her unwavering resistance paid off. The stalking stopped, and she became one of the few lucky ones who managed to escape the clutches of Wilfried and Angelica. In 2011, the Wageners, tempted by an offer to rent an empty house at a good price, moved from Schlangen to Huxter. After 6 years of payments, the house was supposed to become their property. The building was located in the small, close-knit community of Bosseborn, where about 500 people lived. All the residents knew each other, and outsiders were rare. Most of the villagers locked their houses by 10 o'clock in the evening and went to bed, which provided ideal cover for Wilfried and Angelica's sinister activities. The couple did not integrate into the local community, preferring to keep to themselves. On the rare occasions when they interacted with others, they presented themselves as brother and sister. By then, the spouses had already officially divorced, which was probably a strategic move, but they continued to live in the same house. Angelica began placing dating ads in newspapers around the world. Surprisingly, many women responded to the ads. However, not all of them fit the Wageners' dark plans. The ex-husband and wife carefully selected their future victims. The women who responded to the ads had to match a certain profile. Most often they were single, without close relatives or friends, and usually belonged to the lower social class. Such women were easy prey for manipulation. Ideally, they did not drive a car, which made their abduction easier. All this made them ideal victims for Wilfried and Angelica's predatory schemes. In the village, residents who went to sleep at nightfall opened up wonderful opportunities for the Wageners to commit crimes and lure vulnerable women into a web of cruelty and violence. This was the beginning of the House of Horrors in Huxter. The house itself was in terrible condition. The walls were covered with mold and the wallpaper hung in shreds. Chickens, goats, and pigs roamed the grounds. One of the rooms was given over to stray cats, which intensified the feeling of neglect. Upstairs, there was an empty and cold bedroom. In the living room, the only heated room, there was a sagging sofa, a mattress, and a stove. The property was in such a deplorable state that it was no wonder it was offered at a low price. One of the women who responded to Wilfried's ad was an unknown woman he had spoken with on the phone. The idea of the conversation convinced her that he was a kind man. The woman had 4 children who made up her whole world. She agreed to meet Wilfried, hoping to find in him a partner, a man who would become her support and pillar and would love her children. Angelica, who introduced herself as Wilfried's sister, picked up the potential bride and drove her to the house in Huxter. Seeing the almost abandoned, dirty building in front of her, the woman was very surprised but did not show it. Frightened by the eerie atmosphere but full of determination to stay calm, she forced herself not to show fear. She needed to survive for the sake of her children. That night, she was made to sleep on the dirty sofa. Wilfried hugged her from behind while Angelica lay on the mattress on the floor. In the middle of the night, the man tried to take the guest by force. Gathering all her strength, the woman managed to fight him off without provoking the owner of the strange house into anger. Angelica heard everything perfectly but remained indifferent. The next day, the nightmare continued. Wilfried nevertheless overpowered the guest and subjected her to merciless sexual violence. Angelica did nothing to help, and in her heart even felt jealous of her husband because he was paying too much attention to the stranger. The woman endured the harassment, but afterwards she was subjected to another kind of mockery. Wilfried and Angelica taunted her for not enjoying the intimate act, calling her boring and cold. However, this hardly affected the woman. What worried her most were her own children. She was looking for a way to escape the trap she'd fallen into as quickly as possible. A desperate plan began to form in her head. Observing the wretched state of the house, the woman realized that the Wageners were desperately in need of money. She began to play along, talking about repairing the home and what could be done even for a small sum. The woman said she had some savings, but she would need to go to her apartment to get them. Surprisingly, Wilfried and Angelica were so naive that they believed her and drove her home. The captive's heart pounded with fear and hope. As soon as they pulled up to her house, the woman jumped out of the car and rushed into the apartment. She slammed the door and barricaded it with the sofa. Her body trembled with a mixture of horror and relief. Although she suffered psychological trauma from the experience, she miraculously managed to avoid death. She survived and returned to her children, but afterward she also told no one about the incident. Soon a similar situation happened with another woman named Crystal. However, her ordeal took an even darker turn. Crystal responded to one of Wilfried's ads and, like the others, ended up in his house. She genuinely fell in love with the man, which caused strong jealousy in Angelica. Crystal seemed content with the state of the house and even discussed plans to renovate it. The Wageners let her go home because they believed she would return voluntarily. And they were not mistaken. Crystal was happy in her closeness with Wilfried, but could not understand why his sister was always nearby, even during their most intimate romantic moments. This fragile feeling of happiness was destroyed at the beginning of 2012. Driven by jealousy and malice, Angelica accused Crystal of spying on them. In a fit of rage, she attacked her husband's chosen one with pepper spray. From that moment, Crystal's world turned into a nightmare. Wilfried believed his wife and joined the attack. They pounced on the woman, shaved her head, then led her barefoot to the pigsty, chained her, and beat her. It was winter outside, and the captive shivered from the cold. From then on, it was repeated several more times. Once Crystal almost had a chance to be saved when neighbors showed curiosity by looking out the window. Angelica went with Crystal to them. Not knowing how to ask for help, the captive quietly told the residents of the neighboring house that if something was wrong, they could call the police. It was a hidden cry for help on her part, but Angelica understood everything and forced Crystal to return to the house, where she was beaten unconscious and nearly killed. The woman did not even have the opportunity to escape. The doors were always locked and the blinds were down. After the incident with the neighbors, her life turned into hell. She was no longer allowed into the warm room and was forced to sleep on the dirty floor instead of the sofa. The Wageners stripped her of her dignity, took her bank cards, phone, and clothes. Crystal was not even allowed to use the toilet. Instead, they put a chain with a leash around her neck and led her outside like an animal. One night, Crystal was left chained in the pigsty. She was so afraid of the pigs that she periodically screamed. Her screams disturbed Wilfried's sleep. Enraged, he went outside and hit the victim in the face with a shovel. Crystal endured 3 months of horrific attacks. One day, Wilfried and Angelica unexpectedly offered her a document to sign, stating that she had been in their house of her own free will and had inflicted the injuries on herself. After she signed the document, they let her go. Most likely, Crystal had bored the couple, and they decided to find a new victim. The traumatized and humiliated woman, like many others, did not go to the police. Her silent suffering became another dark chapter in the reign of terror of Wilfried and Angelica. And then the matter took an even darker turn. The next woman to respond to the ad was 33-year-old Anna. Unlike the other women, Anna had grown up in a loving and stable environment. She had 2 older sisters and a loving mother. Despite difficulties with learning, Anna lived a full life. She worked as a housekeeper in a nursing home, where she was adored for her dedication and kindness. She had a driver's license and in general was happy. She lacked only romantic relationships. After meeting Wilfried through the ad, Anna instantly fell in love with him. They talked on the phone several times a day and constantly texted. Gradually, Anna distanced herself from her family and after 2 months decided to move in with Wilfried in his house in Huxter, taking her 2 dogs with her. The manipulation began the moment she moved in. Wilfried and Angelica restricted her contact with her mother, allowing only rare voice messages in which she asked for money under various pretexts. For veterinary care for her pets or to buy a new car, for example. In total, Anna's mother sent her more than 25,000 euros, and all this money went to the Wageners. Soon, Wilfried and Anna got engaged. The man gave her a ring he had bought at the supermarket. A few weeks later, the couple had a wedding. Anna informed her mother about the marriage via voicemail. The mother was disappointed by the haste, but accepted her adult daughter's desire to make her own decisions. After the wedding, Anna was supposed to serve Wilfried completely, cook for him, never ask any questions, and take birth control pills in his presence because the man had no desire to have children. If anything was not done, the woman was required to apologize in writing or face cruel punishment. One day, Angelica drove Anna to her mother, and this was their last meeting. Angelica waited in the car while Anna talked with her mom for about half an hour. The woman was happy for her daughter's marriage, but regretted that she had distanced herself from the family. They hugged goodbye, and Anna ran to the car where Angelica was waiting. When her mother tried to meet the new relative, Anna said it was not a very good idea, and the woman did not insist, respecting her daughter's wishes. She saw Anna walk to the car parked farther down the street, get in, and drive away, and that was the last time they saw each other. After that, the violence reached a new level of cruelty. Anna was beaten, tortured, threatened with a gun, doused with boiling water, burned with a lighter, deprived of oxygen, and forced to drink Wilfried's urine. Almost every night she was chained to the radiator and slept on the floor even without a blanket. One night, Anna could not get to the toilet and soiled herself, which caused disgust and revulsion in Wilfried. After that, he began leaving his wife alone, shackling her hands and feet in the old bathtub in the basement, where she shivered from the cold and damp. Meanwhile, Angelica used Anna's phone to send messages to her mother and pretend that everything was fine. She also left voice messages in her own name, scolding Anna's mother for not buying her daughter a wedding gift. In the end, the woman felt guilty and decided to deliver a large sum of money in person as a gift. She knocked on the door of the house in Huxter, but no one answered. The mother had no idea that her daughter was being tormented, so she simply slipped an envelope with money under the door and left without seeing Anna. Meanwhile, Anna grew weaker and weaker. Her hair was regularly pulled out or shaved off. She looked terrible, but that was not enough for Angelica, who began adding a substance to Anna's food to which she was allergic. Because of this, the young woman's body swelled and she felt even worse. Angelica also performed even crueler tricks. One of them was that, knowing the captive's mental state, she hung a noose next to Anna. But even if she had wanted to, she would not have been able to take her own life because she simply did not have the strength to reach the rope. Another time, Angelica deliberately left the back door open, giving Anna a ghostly chance to escape. When the woman, completely naked and staggering, made it outside, Angelica caught up with her and pushed her to the ground. Anna hit her head so hard that Wilfried had to drag her back into the house. The neighbors saw everything, but unfortunately none of them reported it to the police. Back inside, the couple took Anna back to the basement and chained her up. She was so weak she could barely move. Angelica turned on the faucet, letting water slowly fill the bathtub, apparently planning to drown the captive or punish her this way for trying to escape. However, Wilfried intervened, turned off the water, and pulled the plug, leaving Anna lying in the cold bathtub all night. By morning, the captive had died. The couple wanted to bury her body under a pile of garbage or throw it into the cesspool, but they decided to dispose of the remains another way. They put them in the freezer and then sawed off small pieces and burned them in the oven. Angelica did all the dirty work. She ground the charred remains into dust and mixed it with sand. At night, the couple drove around the area and scattered the remains along the village streets. They also got rid of both of Anna's dogs. One was simply kicked out and the other was hanged, thus ending its stay in the House of Horrors. Even after Anna's death, Angelica continued to write to her mother. The woman learned about her daughter's horrific death only when she saw a news report and when the Wageners' crimes became public knowledge. For about 14 months, new victims continued to enter the House of Horrors. Each of them was broken in her own way, but somehow they all seemed to survive. The last straw that ended the nightmare was 41-year-old Susan. Susan perfectly fit the victim profile. She had been adopted as a child. At 16, the girl suffered a serious trauma when she discovered her mother's lifeless body. This event left a deep mark on her soul. Susan married early, had a child, but for some reason abandoned her first family. Later, she married again and had a second child, but left him as well. In the end, the lonely and vulnerable Susan decided to start over. It was at that moment that she saw the newspaper ad. At first, Wilfried seemed to her like a good man. He did not drink and was close to his sister, which characterized him as a model family man. But very soon, the man showed his true nature. As soon as Susan moved into the house in Huxter, they brazenly robbed her, took her money and bank cards, and the torture began. She was forced to carry heavy bags up and down the stairs for no reason, just to humiliate her. Wilfried and Angelica filmed it on video, enjoying the captive's suffering. Susan lost weight very quickly. Neighbors, seeing her emaciated appearance and bald head, thought she had cancer. Behind closed doors, Wilfried beat her and forced her to drink his urine. Angelica gladly took part in the torture. Like the previous victim, Susan was made to sign a statement taking responsibility for her own injuries. The torture was brutal, and one evening it reached its peak. Wilfried attacked Susan without calculating his strength, and Angelica hit the captive's head against the kitchen table several times. When the couple heard a crack, they panicked, fearing the woman would not survive. Angelica began to panic. She did not want to deal with another corpse, so the couple decided to get rid of the captive as quickly as possible. They stuffed the barely alive Susan into the car, intending to take her back to her apartment. It was the night of April 21st, 2016. The Wageners were speeding towards Susan's house. The woman herself lay unconscious in the back seat. Her body, wrapped in black garbage bags, was cold and covered with bruises and abrasions. Susan desperately needed medical help. Suddenly, the car began knocking and stopped. Despite the warm night, Susan was shivering uncontrollably. In panic, Angelica ran to the nearest house and banged on the door, begging for a taxi to be called. When the taxi arrived, the victim's condition deteriorated sharply. She began convulsing. The couple's panic turned into real horror, and they shouted for someone to call an ambulance. The arriving medical team immediately noticed cuts and bruises on Susan's body. There were rope marks on her ankles and wrists indicating prolonged restraint. She also had a severe blood infection. Despite the doctor's desperate efforts, Susan died from her injuries. Hospital staff immediately notified the authorities. The investigation moved quickly. Just 6 days after Susan's death, police arrived at the Wageners' house in Huxter and found numerous pieces of evidence, including belongings of several victims and partial remains of Anna. Wilfried and Angelica were taken into custody. At first, Angelica denied her involvement in the crimes, but when she learned that her ex-husband had put all the blame on her, she revealed the names of 7 women they had tortured, although it is believed that the actual number of victims was much higher. In court, Wilfried and Angelica did not look at each other. Both were charged with manslaughter. What was shocking was that the court could not prove that Anna or Susan had been deliberately killed in cold blood. Angelica portrayed herself as a frightened victim who had been forced to commit atrocities against others. Wilfried's defense focused on his mental abilities. According to reports, his intelligence level was 59 points. The court psychiatrist doubted that he could distinguish good from evil. In contrast, Angelica had a high intelligence level, but she showed traits of autism combined with psychopathy. She manipulated people through intimate relationships and demonstrated a complete lack of empathy. Angelica also preferred to dominate in relationships and had an insatiable desire to keep everything under control. In the end, 49-year-old Angelica Wageners received 13 years in prison, and her ex-husband, 48-year-old Wilfried Wageners, was sentenced to 11 years with the sentence to be served in a psychiatric clinic. In 2020, Wilfried was transferred to a regular prison because the authorities considered him fit to serve his sentence in a standard facility. However, in 2022, calls emerged to consider the possibility of his preventive detention, which could lead to an indefinite term behind bars. The sentence of the Wageners put an end to a case that will forever remain in German history as one of the most disgusting and cruel crimes committed not by lone maniacs, but by what seemed to be an ordinary family from a quiet German village. An ordinary married couple. If you are finished watching, you're a real true crime fan. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. See you in the next video.